Hello, everyone. This is Stacey Barr here. Thank you so much for joining us on this webcast. And its purpose is to answer a very straightforward question for you, which is, what is PuMP? Now, the plan was that I would be joined by my regional PuMP partner for Africa, Peter Ndar, and he's having technical problems getting on. So I'm just going to continue, and let's all keep our fingers crossed that he can solve his problems and join. It seems to be a bit of a pattern with this webcast. We had to reschedule this one, as many of you know, on account of a storm completely obliterating my power last time on the 30th of September, I think it was, we had it scheduled. So I really thank you for your patience. We're kind of almost there, but if you end up just with me today, I hope you're not going to be too disappointed. But I am going to be speaking on Peter's behalf in any case about the PuMP work that workshops that he's got coming up. But thank you for joining. Now, this webcast is an information session, but I still want it to be very practical and useful for you. It is about the PuMP approach to performance measurement, organizational performance measurement specifically. I'm really curious about your motivation for joining today. So if you'd like to share what you're hoping to most get out of today's webcast, that would just be lovely. And you can do that by typing it in the questions box in your webcast control panel. I'm going to invite you to interact several times throughout the webcast, so please use this as a bit of a warm-up. What's prompted you to join the webcast today? I guess to warm you up a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised if it's maybe because you're interested in coming to a PuMP Blueprint training workshop. Maybe you have a colleague who's recommended PuMP to you, and you just want to find out what it's all about. Maybe PuMP's already used in your organization and you're joining us simply to learn a little bit more about it and get to a point where you can understand it a bit more. Now, to give you a full answer to the question, what is PuMP, there are a few things we're going to explore together. Firstly, where PuMP came from. I'm even going to talk to you about why we call it PuMP, where that name came from. We'll talk about what makes PuMP the only true performance measurement methodology there is, at least that we've found so far. We'll also talk about why PuMP has 8 steps in it and what each step does. A little bit of information I have for you about who uses PuMP all around the world, how PuMP gets implemented into organizations as well, roughly how long it takes, and I'll also share a few tips for how to get that right. We're going to spend a little bit of time too just exploring whether PuMP fits with other methodologies you might be more familiar with, like Lean Six Sigma, the Balanced Scorecard, OKRs, that sort of thing. And then if PuMP sounds like it was made for you, at the end of this webcast, I'll share some details with you about how you can learn the full PuMP Blueprint methodology, and in particular with Peter Ndar and his workshops that he's set up for, I think he's going to go in person, not online, in Africa. Roland has shared what's motivated him to join us today, and that is engagement with key stakeholders and choosing the right measures. And that is a really good reason to join, Roland. Perfect. Great. Now, if you are not only new to PuMP, but you're also new to me and to Peter, I'll just give you a quick introduction. Now, even though Peter is not here live on account of technical difficulties, I'll still introduce you to him. So that's me on the left, if that's not obvious. I'm a performance measure specialist. I am the creator of PuMP, actually, and I've written a couple of books based on the PuMP process and also its principles, one called Prove It and another called Practical Performance Measurement. Now, Peter is my licensed partner in Africa to deliver all our PuMP workshops over there. I think Peter might be trying to join us right now. So, Pete, I think you're muted at the moment. So if you're ready to unmute, just try that, and we'll see if you're coming through okay. Not quite yet, hey? All right, I'll give you a few more moments, Peter, but when you're ready, when you're able to unmute, just do that and jump in and interrupt me. Great. Now, performance measurement has been my career since the early 1990s. In fact, it's pretty much everything that I've ever done. Sometime after creating PuMP, it started to make its way around the world, and I could no longer keep up with delivering the training and consulting on my own. And I was lucky enough to meet Peter. We met in the United States. I think it might have been 2013, and since quickly became one of my licensed PuMP partners and has since brought PuMP into many African countries, which is awesome. Peter is the founder and also CEO of BC. And like I said, I've been working with him as one of my PuMP partners since 2013. And the thing that Peter in particular has mastered is the use of PuMP for strategy execution. He's got heaps of great things stories to share about how he goes about doing that. How are we going, Pete? Have you managed to unmute or sort out the technical? Not yet. You're not coming through yet. All right, I'll give you a bit more time to sort that out, and I'll keep going on your behalf.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, Peter, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm better now.
Thank you.
Peter, I kind of just finished kind of introducing me, and I was about to start introducing you. Do you want to pick up?
Yes, sure. Yeah, I think I had you introducing me, and hi everyone. I am basically a strategy execution specialist, and as Stacy has said, I have managed to incorporate PuMP into my work in all the strategy execution services that we offer. And it's been a really great tool to use. It's really been great collaborating with Stacy in this area, and it's made a lot of differences for my clients. Unfortunately, most of the people I interact with, they always think that PuMP is a replacement to the balanced scorecard. However, that is far from the truth. It's my hope that today you will better understand what PuMP is and how it fits in strategy execution and strategic performance management.
Perfect. Now, PuMP is a methodology, like I mentioned before, that I created a long time ago, but it was to make performance measurement specifically very practical and engaging and meaningful. And through this webcast, Peter and I want to help you to come to know enough about PuMP to decide if it's the right performance measurement methodology for you. And when I started out, I had no idea that I could spend an entire career focused just on performance measurement. But pretty quickly, data that I gathered back then and have gathered ever since keeps showing me why this career is still growing, even decades after I started it. Now, this data I've been collecting from my subscribers all around the world and for many, many years. And I asked them about the KPI success they have. So I've got about 14,000 data points behind the results that you can all see in the chart there. And as you can see, even to this day, the vast majority of organizations just don't have great KPIs. Pete and I are curious about you though, so I'm going to just launch a quick poll just to ask you, how much success does your organization currently have with KPIs? So here it comes. Are you number one, where you have great strategic and operational KPIs in your organization? Or two, you've got some great KPIs, but only in some places. Maybe you're at three, some KPIs, but you wouldn't really say any of them are great. Or maybe so far you have no success in KPIs. So I'll give you a little bit more time to choose the option that best suits your organization right now. So about 3/4 of you have voted. I'll give you a little bit more time. Great. Okay, another few seconds. Wow, it's just about all of you. Great participation. Very interesting results. All right, I will close the poll now and share these results with you all. So Pete, this is interesting. We've got a 50-50 split between great KPIs, but only in some places, and some KPIs, but are not great. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all.
It's not too dissimilar to the results in the data that I've been gathering either. So let me just hide this so I can show you the graph again. As you can see, most people, at least over the last, how long have I been collecting this data for? Probably 15 to 20 years. Most people fall in those same two categories that all of you just responded to as well. Roland's saying that it's such a big organisation that there are some good ones for the organisation, but not many in the area that Roland works in. And that, you know, that's typical Roland, absolutely. Okay, over to you, Pete.
About 90% of organizations are below the red line. And we think that's an underestimate, because when we see the performance measures of some organizations that think they are good, doing it great, those measures have the same problems everyone else's has. They are not direct evidence of outcomes. They are not aligned to strategy, and they are not engaging people to improve performance. If we want performance to reach more goals sooner and with less effort, if we want our organizations to perform well at what they exist to do, if we want high performance culture, then we have to move our performance measures and KPIs above the red line. The reason we have such bad KPIs is because almost everyone struggles with exactly how to do performance measurement.
Exactly. Now, PuMP actually came from those struggles that Pete just mentioned. It came directly from our struggles with performance measurement. So if you like, as Pete and I continue to kind of map out where PuMP came from, go right ahead and share with us in the questions box the KPI or measurement struggles that you really hate the most, the struggle with coming up with good measures that you really wish you could solve. So feel very welcome to share that in the questions box, and I'll come back and check on that in a moment. While you do that though, I'll share some of the struggles that I had when I started my career in the railways. So one was that only tangible things were measured, like on-time running and derailments. The intangible things, like culture or effectiveness, they were considered to be immeasurable. So we had immeasurable goals, and that was a struggle. Also, everyone complained that most of the measures they had were not useful. They were not relevant to what really mattered. And you know, one of the things that really mattered was the safety of passengers, but it wasn't measured all that well. Another struggle was that, like, if a measure showed a bad result, people would point fingers and blame rather than turn their attention just to fixing the problems. So accountability was a real struggle. And so was this thing I call variation overwhelm. Managers would react to every little variation in the measures from month to month. If it got worse, they'd jump on it and fix it. If it got better, they'd pat themselves on the back every month. But still, over the longer term, not much would improve. And finally, well, not finally, there are lots more struggles than this, but another big one we had was that performance reports were bulky, they were overwhelming, they were really hard to navigate. And often those performance reports were filled with as many different chart types as possible to keep them interesting, and a lot of words that were really just reporting on action, not on performance. So I haven't seen anybody type or share a struggle in the questions box right now, but maybe just raise your hand if you can relate to any of those 5 struggles that I've just described. There's a little raise your hand tool on the webcast panel. Yeah, great. Thanks, Bronte. You found it. Olivier, thank you. That's great. Rawlings, Grace. Okay, excellent. Quite a few of you can relate to those struggles. They're pretty common. Just about everybody I meet has the same set to some degree anyway. Roland says a lot of our work is taking and solving staff calls about software issues brought into our team by a call management system, struggling to find good measures as the calls can be put on hold, different categories, etc. Call centres are notoriously difficult to measure in a meaningful way, Roland, I understand. Great. Pete.
Indeed, there are certainly more measurement struggles than those outlined, but the majority of them have some common causes. We say they are common because everywhere we see these struggles, we can see these causes behind them. One of them is this with words. Goals are immeasurables because they are written with vague, jargonistic whistle words. The other challenge is brainstorming measures. Measures tend to be trivial because people keep brainstorming to find them, or they buy them from KPI databases or industry KPI lists. And this brainstorming issue reminds me when I was a practitioner of the balanced scorecard. And I think this is one of the favorite tools we use for finding measures.
There's also, brainstorming indeed.
Yeah. And there's no accountability because we use measures to judge people for hitting targets. They often can't control. And even if we don't, they still believe we're using measures to hold them accountable. We have variation overwhelm because we only report month-to-month differences in measures values, which mostly vary just due to randomness. And this is a problem that you struggle with. I still struggle with up to today because that's how we are basically trained to compare one data point with another.
Yeah.
Our reports are useless because we rush to create dashboards filled with all the silly, pretty dashboard junk, the dials, all those beautiful things. Or we mistake activity progress reports for performance reports. Do any of these practices happen in your organization? Because
yes, I've
come across, yes, sorry.
No, Pete, you're right, go ahead.
Most of the clients I've worked with, they have this practices basically, and they're quite ingrained in the organization.
They are, and that's the problem. And when they're ingrained, you often don't really understand that they're causing the struggles. Everyone, I'm going to launch a little poll here just to check in with you and see, are any of these causes that Pete just described, do you see any of these happening in your organization? So here we come with the poll. So go right ahead. You can tick as many of these as apply. If you have all of these, tick them all. If you've just got one or two of them that seem to be big problems, then just tick those. Entirely up to you. While you do that, I might just answer Galopi's question. I struggle to understand if it's appropriate to attach KPIs to individuals or to departmental performance and organizational performance. Pete, we in PuMP, we don't ever try to attach KPIs to individuals, yeah?
Yeah. It's all about the organizational results because we get results through processes, through what the organization does and not through people. Unfortunately, there's this confusion between people performance and organizational performance. And I think this is one thing that PuMP practitioners have to learn, or those willing to, or those who want to become PuMP practitioners need to differentiate between organizational performance, organizational results, and people performance.
Yeah, and the distinction is so important to make. Thanks, Pete. Bronte's asking, can you clarify the month-to-month comparison? I might answer that really quickly, Bronte. It just means that if you say you're tracking total expenses over time, and you want to see if you're getting expenses down or getting them up, what the typical practice is that happens is people just look at this month's expenses compared to last month's, or maybe the same month last year, and they just work out if that difference means things are getting better or worse. But 2 points of data is never enough to really understand that. So we'll segue back into this poll. Most of you have voted now, so I'll close it and share the results. And Grace has just said, I identify with all the struggles and causes, and I think if you look at how that's balanced, Pete, across all those struggles, she's not far from the truth, is she?
Exactly.
There isn't really one there that stands out significantly more than the others. These are causes that are in most organisations. Okay, thanks everyone for sharing the causes in your organisation. I'll just go back to our information here. Our measurement struggles are not going to go away unless we remove those causes. But to remove them, we can't just try harder at doing what we're doing. So, you know, we can't just get better at brainstorming measures because brainstorming is the problem. We can't get more accountability for measures because our definition of accountability, our accountability model, is the problem. We can't reduce the monthly variation in our measures because our focus on that month-to-month variation is the problem. So we need an entirely different approach to performance measurement. And I felt that when I worked in the railways, and that's really when I first created PuMP to help me solve those struggles. My colleagues and I back then had these struggles that you're having today, that everyone still has. PuMP started out as my set of solutions to remove the causes that were causing the struggles. And those solutions gradually evolved into the full performance measurement process that PuMP is today. For example, one of the solutions in PuMP is that we stop writing our goals with weasel words and instead we write them in language a 10-year-old would understand to make them clear and specific and measurable. We also stop brainstorming altogether, and instead we design each measure as a quantification of the evidence that convinces us a goal is achieved. And that's a very logical process when you learn it. We stop measuring people, like Pete said before. Instead, we focus everybody on measuring the processes that they work in. They measure the organisation, not their own performance. We also stop comparing month-to-month performance, and instead we use a tool called an XMR chart to help us focus on patterns and signals of change over time or through time, not just between one point of time and another second point of time. And also we stop thinking that dashboards are just about being pretty and that reports are all about how we're progressing with our activity. And instead we make our performance reports answer just 3 questions. Now, if you've got a pen and paper handy here, you might want to jot this down. What are the 3 questions that a performance report should answer? And question 1 is, what is performance doing? Question 2 is, why is it doing that? And question 3 is, what are we doing about it? So question 1, what's performance doing? Question 2, why is it doing that? And question 3, what are we doing about it? And the thing that just about everyone fails to realize when they go about performance measurement is that it's actually a process. It's not like a brainstorming event or a workshop. It is a process. Now, in the webinar handout section on your little webinar control panel, you'll find a document called PuMP Blueprint. It's a PDF. So if you want to see a larger version and keep a version of this PuMP flowchart that we're going to build for you now, you can download that PDF and keep it and you might be able to zoom in and see a little bit more than what you'll see on the slide. PuMP is a performance measurement process with 8 steps, and it has 8 steps because there are some essential tasks in the quest to choose and to implement and to use performance measures that are meaningful. Now, we've found that 8 steps is just enough to separate the biggest decisions in the measurement process so that you can properly create the prerequisites for the next step. So get one step right, and then the next step's easier, and so on. And at each step in PuMP, it's designed as a practical technique, like a logical set of instructions to fix or to prevent those struggles that we all share, the ones we just talked about before. Now, as Pete's going to walk us through these 8 steps and just give you a very brief introduction to it, and as he does that, just maybe ask yourself, is there anything that Pete describes that you realize is missing from your current approach to measurement? So as Pete walks you through, just reflect on that. What might be missing from your measurement approach? Pete, can I hand over to you to walk through PuMP?
Sure. Step 1 is understanding measurement's purpose, and it's all about shifting people's paradigm. We use a diagnostic that helps people explore that the real purpose for performance measurement is continuous improvement, not judgment and blame. In step 2 is mapping measurable results. Here we use a measurability test technique to figure out why our goals are hard to measure, and we clarify those goals so they do become measurable. And every team maps the alignment of their measurable goals to the strategic direction of the organization. Step 3 is designing meaningful measures. We use a measure design technique that creates quantitative measures from the direct evidence of our goals, and then we choose those that are the best balance between relevance and ability to implement. We don't brainstorm at all in this step. Step 4 is building buy-in to measures. We use an event called a measure gallery. I'm sure you have had, you know about art galleries, so something similar. And basically to make it fast, easy, and fun to engage a lot of people and get their input to each set of measures that gets developed by teams using the PuMP methodology. We don't ask for sign-off, we create buy-in. Step 5 is implementing measures. We define each measure in a lot of detail with a measure definition template that is so comprehensive that it's almost an implementation plan for each measure. We don't leave measure implementation to chance. Step 6 is interpreting signals from measures. Here we use a technique called XMR charts, which highlights signals in our measures that are based on proven statistical methods that don't confuse random variation with real signals. We don't react to variation from month to month. Step 7 is reporting performance measures. We design our dashboards and reports using a framework that makes sure the 3 priority questions that, as Stacey talked about earlier, are easily and quickly answered. What is performance doing? What is it? Why is it doing that? And how? And now what do we do about it? We don't clutter reports with chart junk or activity details or minutia. Step 8 is reaching performance targets. We use a framework that uses our measures as the lenses to choose our improvement projects or change initiatives and to evaluate them once they are implemented to keep reaching towards our performance targets. We don't judge success of initiatives by whether they were on time and on budget. And finally, PuMP doesn't just focus on the technical aspects of measuring. It also makes sure we build engagement and buy-in towards the entire process. That's because it's a team process. PuMP is not done to or for people. It's done by those people. So far, our clients all around the world have not come across any method that is as complete, comprehensive, logical, and practical as PuMP is. In fact, it seems to uniquely possess some essential techniques that are missing from every other approach, traditionally used for KPIs or strategy execution. We'll soon explore some of those other approaches, but you will quickly see that none of them are true measurement methodologies. But first, let's throw a spotlight on the essential techniques that make PuMP a uniquely effective measurement methodology.
Yes, let's do that. But Pete, you just mentioned before about why PuMP is not done to or for people, it's done by people. And I wanted to highlight that again because Galopi has mentioned, asked another question here that relates to that. The biggest challenges come when cascading strategic objectives to departmental and down to individual level. We feel that even KPIs must be cascaded, and that's where we lose it. But then again, how do we measure individual output without individual KPIs? And I think just extending what Pete said before about, measurement's much more powerful when it's done by people to improve a process and done in a team way. So we are not interested in measuring individual output. What we are trying to do is use measures to increase the collaboration of people in a team environment so that the team contribution is a lot bigger. We don't think the organization's performance is a sum of the individual people's outputs. In fact, it actually drives organizational performance in the other direction. So that's kind of why we focus measurement on processes and not on people. Okay, let's keep going, Pete.
Thank you. Well, PuMP has 8 deliberate steps. There are probably 5 essential techniques that make the most difference in solving our KPI struggles. These essential techniques are what most measurement approaches are missing. The first one, focus measurement on continuous improvement, not judgment or blame or personal performance management. I think this is what Stacey was talking about. And we must remember when we talk of personal performance, remember people work in a process and they work on tasks. We are talking about results. We are not talking, and there's a difference between an output and the results. So output is part of the results, but there's different levels of results, the output and the impact. And it's important to understand the difference. I find PuMP measures more impact than output.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that difference.
Absolutely.
The second is how we write reasonable goals to be measurable first before we try to find the right measure for them. So you can't measure what you can't observe or you can't detect. So if you can't describe it in a way that is observable, detectable, it's very difficult to measure. Third is that we create measures not by brainstorming, but by agreeing the evidence that will convince our goals are happening And then we quantify that evidence so we can track it over time. I think this is one of the most powerful aspects of PuMP, that you're able to clearly agree on the convincing evidence of your result. Number 4 is that we use XMF charts, which are the most statistical valid way of fitting real signals in our measures out of the random variation that every measure naturally has. And 5th is that we design reports and dashboards to give us the information we need to act on our measures, which is information that tells us what performance is doing, why it's doing that, and what we should do about it.
So PuMP is a lot more than this, as you would have gathered when Pete walked us through the 8 steps before. But these, we feel, are probably the essential techniques that really are the backbone or the core of what makes PuMP work really well. But are any of these sorts of essential techniques missing from the way your organization currently does performance measurement? So again, let me launch another poll and let's explore that together. So you are able to choose as many of those as you like. Well, as many of them that you know or feel are missing from your organization's current KPI approach. Are you missing a focus of measurement on continuous improvement? Are you missing this technique to rewrite your goals so that they're measurable before you measure them? Are you missing a technique of designing measures or creating them by quantifying the direct evidence of the goals they measure? Are you missing the ability to highlight real signals in your performance measures over time? Are your reports not answering those questions? What, why, and now what? Oh, I've got a typo in that last one. It should say what, why, and now what, not now way. I just noticed that. There we go. All right, a little bit more time. Just have a ponder of those and choose as many as you know are missing from your current KPI approach. Great, I'm not seeing too many more new votes come in. A few more seconds, there were some more then. And I'll close this poll now and share the results with you all. There we go. Pete, what do you think? Pete, can you see those results there?
I was muted. Sorry, I was muted. I can see. I can see the fourth struggle is quite common. We get a lot of this in this kind of scores. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. The rest of them are still pretty high. Like most of you, have noticed that these are missing from your organisation. Roland's just said the first 3 points need buy-in, as you say, a team. Is it an essential first step to have a team? I know my answer to that. Pete, what would you say to Roland? Is it essential to have a team to do measurement?
Yes, it's very essential when you're developing the measures. To do it with a team. It's all about buy-in, and the team must be from this process area that you're trying to develop measures for, because they have to use the measures to improve their performance. So buy-in is very important.
Yeah, exactly. And like what Pete says about the buy-in is the most important thing. Other benefits of having the team is that no one person knows everything about what needs to be measured, and it's much better to be able to share ideas and learn from each other and have a bigger pool of ideas about what's worth measuring by collaborating as a team. And collaboration is something that we need. Organizations' performance does not improve without collaboration. So starting the collaboration at the measurement step makes it much easier to continue the collaboration when you start improving performance with the measures. Thanks everyone for participating in that. Let me just take those results away. Doing performance measurement deliberately, and by deliberately I mean with a good performance measurement methodology, that is what makes it work. It makes it faster and easier, and that means we waste a lot less time and energy trying to find the right measures. It also makes it more meaningful and engaging for people so that we can tap into that collaboration and also the commitment of people to improve performance. Ultimately, it makes it possible for us, for our organizations, for our teams, for our departments, our business units to reach goals sooner and with less effort. Now, after having probably more now than 20 years of research and development, this is what PuMP does for us. At this point, is anyone wondering why it's called PuMP? Just raise your hand if that thought has entered your mind. Why is it called PuMP? Yeah, okay, a few of you have. Well, let me answer that for you then. In the 1990s, that was when I was working in the railways. And when I was there, I wrote a book to capture everything that I had learned and was learning about performance measurement. Now, some copies of this book are reportedly still in circulation all these years later. The book was called How to Measure Non-Financial Performance, and it was about the performance measurement process. I was working with a colleague, Anne, and we were trying to come up with a name for this process. We wanted it to have this feeling of flow because a process is a flow, but we didn't want to lose that focus on measurement. So Anne said, it's PuMP. And she explained that the letter U meant that proper performance measurement is up to you. It's not going to get done by itself. So PuMP has evolved a great deal since those days, and I rewrote the book, which is dramatically different from the first version, and I published this book. It's called Practical Performance Measurement. Now, I'm working on a second edition, so the first edition's out of print now, but you can get a free copy of the digital version of this book if you want, which explains all about PuMP, and you can get that at my website, staceybarr.com/signup, SIGNUP. staceybarr.com/signup. And also since those days in the railways, PuMP has found its way all around the world, as Peter is testament to. I have a question for you, though, before we talk about how widely PuMP's used. I'm curious to know, do you think that the approach you take for performance measurement should be tailored uniquely to your organization? Should a performance measurement approach be tailored uniquely to your organization? Obviously, you can only pick one of these options. It's either a yes or it's a no. If you're unsure, it's a maybe. Or maybe you think it depends on the situation, or maybe you're just not sure. So I'll give you a little bit longer to vote. Pete, I'm not sure if you're watching the results coming in, but that's interesting, yeah, what we're seeing so far.
Yeah.
Okay, a little bit more time. And I will close the poll now and show you all what Pete and I are chuckling about. So overwhelmingly, people believe, Pete, that a measurement approach has to be or should be tailored to the organisation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Pete?
Well, whereas it's true, it should be tailored, but we need to understand performance measurement is a process, and the process is applicable in each organization, and can be integrated. So yeah. Measures themselves will will differ from organization to organization because of the results that the organizations are pursuing. But performance measurement is a process and has very specific activities that have to be steps that have to be followed for you to be able to have a good measure and track it. So that aspect, we need to realize that it's very generic. Yeah, but yes, it eventually need to be integrated into the other management process in the organization.
Yeah, lovely response. I mean, in all honesty, everyone, I used to think that that the approach to measurement needed to be tailored. And that's kind of what I set out to do. Is with each new client I had, I thought I'll have to tailor PuMP and how it works for that client. But it just kept happening over and over again with each client that they would revert back to the default PuMP approach. Or we'd realize that the things that they tried to change weren't working and caused problems. So we went back to the default PuMP approach. And I finally got brave enough to trust the process, and I followed it each time. And that's when PuMP's popularity began to grow. And just like Pete said, it's because the approach we take to measurement needs to be the same so that it can produce a tailored result for our organization. But Pete, PuMP's used everywhere now.
Yes. We have actually lost track of exactly where PuMP has since ended up in the world. However, we do know the people and organizations my global team and I work directly with. And so here is a summary from our own records. PuMP is practiced in 91 countries at the moment by 900 plus organizations that are in every sector. About 41% at all, at all levels of government. We have got about 6% in non-profit, and 50%, 6% non-profit, and about 53% organization, which are in for-profit or they are for-profit organizations.
Oh, sorry, I clicked too quickly. There we go. Back where we're up to.
Yes. And it's also used in countless industries, but some of the biggest are government administration, the defense, local government, natural resources, transport, and utilities. The people that directly do come to us for learning or help with PuMP are mostly in one of three roles: a senior executive or CEO, the head of strategy or performance for the organization. Others who work directly with the measurement process, like data scientists, business analysts, improvement specialists, and also the rest are mostly managers and their team members who want to measure their impact better. When these people have learned PuMP, there's usually 3 stages to how they implement it, basically.
Most successful PuMP implementations start with kind of a proofing phase, if you like, to give PuMP a really good try. Then they move into the first iteration of practicing PuMP across the organization, and that first iteration starts getting everyone aligned to the strategic direction. Then after they have a stable foundation, they can then fully adopt PuMP, so it gets them really performing better, and that's the performing stage. Now, the first important condition to the success of PuMP is that you implement it organically. And this means that we don't train everyone in PuMP and then launch into a whole organization-wide rollout. All the poor measurement practices that still exist in our organizations have created too much negative baggage for that kind of approach to work. And we don't want that negative baggage to get in the way of a PuMP implementation. And that's why we start with the proofing phase.
Yeah, the proofing phase starts with a few PuMP pilots, usually led by a few people trained in PuMP. These pilots usually lead to other teams noticing and getting interested to try PuMP for themselves. The proofing phase is based on another two conditions for PuMP to be successful. Firstly, to start immediately, and secondly, to start with a focus on practice, not perfection. The proofing phase often only needs between 3 to 6 months. When there's enough evidence in the organization that PuMP is creating measures that create really improvement, it's time for the leadership to give their support. And they do this by applying PuMP to measure the strategic direction. Another condition for PuMP success is leadership support, which doesn't have to come at the start, but should come soon after. Once the leadership team has used PuMP to measure the strategic direction, PuMP then helps that strategic direction cascade down to more teams throughout the organization, aligning them more directly to the strategic goals. This is really the first full iteration of the organization practicing the PuMP way of measuring and improving performance. And it can take 1 to 2 years to move through this phase. As PuMP is being implemented across the organization, it's also being integrated into the organization's other processes too. When PuMP is fully adopted as the organization measurement approach, that's when the organization really starts performing. It gets embedded into planning, reporting, and other performance management processes too. It does take a few years though for an organization to master performance measurement, create a strong performance culture, and reach performance excellence. And of course, for the integration of PuMP to work, we need to see how it fits with other commonly used strategy and performance techniques.
So most organizations, I guess, will manage their performance with, at its core, 3 basic processes. One is planning, another is reporting, you might call it monitoring, and the third is improvement, or you might also call that strategy execution. But most of the methods for these processes get confused as also being performance measurement methods, and they're really not. Now, we'll discuss just a few of the most common ones now, but as we do that, if you've got any others that you know of, please just share them in the questions box, and if we've got time, we'll respond to some of those too. But Pete, let's get started.
Yeah, firstly, how does PuMP fit with planning methods? The balance scorecard, for example, is often thought of as a measurement method, but it only provides a framework for strategy design. And by the way, it's not even strategy design. I normally say it's a wisdom organizer, a framework to organize your wisdom regarding your strategy. And it doesn't give us any instructions of how to write measurable objectives, nor how to find or implement or use strategic measures. There are the tools like OKRs, I don't know whether you've heard about them, which stands for Objective and Key Results. This framework is focusing on how to information, but most of the OKRs I've seen, which include all the examples in the very popular book about OKR, Measure What Matters by John Doerr, are a confusing mix of WYSIWYG goals and actions with some occasional trivial measures. Planning methods usually tell us to create measures or KPIs for our goals, but they never really give us in exactly how to create the quantitative evidence directly related to our goals. What PuMP contributes directly to these planning methodologies is a technique to make goals measurable, a technique to design the best possible measure for those goals, and a framework for cascading the strategy and getting the whole organization aligned to it. And PuMP steps 1, 2, and 3 do exactly this.
So secondly, let's explore, how does PuMP fit with reporting or monitoring methods? Now, every decision maker wants a dashboard to quickly show them which aspects of performance might most need their attention. And that's fair enough, but to commission a dashboard to be designed before doing the thinking just leads to a dashboard that contains only the measures that are readily available and not the measures that might really be needed. And scorecards are kind of versions of dashboards. They kind of give us a more summarized snapshot of performance. But they're even worse because they focus on trivial summaries and almost like a single number assessment of performance. You know, is it better than last month or not? They're often wrong because they don't treat random variation in our measures as signals. So they basically make us constantly overreact, react to measures when we don't need to. Performance reporting methods, they're all about telling us how our measures are tracking so that we can take action if we need to, but they all depend on us already having the meaningful measures selected and the right data ready to plug into the dashboard. If dashboards and scorecards are coupled by a process like PuMP, then they can be designed at the right time for the right measures and be capable of answering the right questions about performance. Now in PuMP, steps 5, 6, and 7 do exactly that for us.
Thirdly, how does PuMP fit with improvement methods? Let's take, for example, Lean Six Sigma, which might be the most common performance improvement methodology on the planet. It heavily emphasizes measurement, but even still, people have trouble coming up with meaningful measures for the Six Sigma project because the measurements, how-to instructions aren't there. Another one is benchmarking. When I learned about it, it was about learning from the process designs of the best organizations. But nowadays, it can sometimes be reduced to a numerical comparison and ranking procedure. We need to make sure that the measures we are comparing are relevant to our own organization strategy and lead us to useful improvement ideas. Otherwise, there's a danger of following somebody else's strategy. Improvement of performance is all about closing the gap between a measure's current performance and its targeted performance. But that's going to be a complete waste of time unless we already have the right measure. And improvement of performance happens in step 8 in PuMP, which is switching performance targets, which overlaps with processes like Lean Six Sigma and benchmarking. But PuMP does two things to help improvement methods like this. Firstly, it makes sure the right measures are the focus of improvement. And secondly, it makes sure those measures are used to test the success of the improvement initiatives. And PuMP steps 6 and 7 do this for you.
So there may be other methods for planning or reporting or improvement that your organization uses. And if you're wondering whether PuMP will fit with them, feel very welcome to share them in the questions box, and I'll come back and see if you've got any there that we can respond to. But in the meantime, PuMP is a full and complete approach to performance measurement, and it can almost seamlessly integrate with your entire organizational performance management system. We haven't found a case where it hasn't been able to yet after all these years and all those countries and all those organizations using it. If that is the kind of approach to measurement that you've been looking for, that you want, then we're going to share a little bit with you now about how you can learn all you need to know about PuMP. There you are, Peter.
In our PuMP blueprint training programs, you will systematically learn each type of PuMP. You will learn its technique. You'll see how the corresponding template or tool makes it practical. You'll have really examples to follow. And as you learn each step, you will practice it. We also give you some time and coaching to help you begin applying PuMP to measure your own goals. When you go back to work, you'll know exactly what to do and how to do it. Plus, you also get free silver membership in our PuMP community for exclusive case studies, how-to tips, and exclusive webcasts. You can learn the PuMP blueprint in one of the following 3 ways. One, at one of our live public training workshops, or by hosting your own private in-house workshop for your colleagues, or you can email me for more information about how we can help you with better performance measurement the PuMP way. In the photo, you can see me training. This was an in-person workshop from a few years ago. And like the rest of the world, our live online workshops have not been very popular in Africa. So now with the vaccination and the relaxation of COVID protocols, we are resuming our in-person workshops from November this year. And indeed, our next workshop for Africa will be in November in Mombasa. In the handouts for the webinar, you'll find the PuMP workshop registration form.
So yes, you can just click on that and download. And that's for Pete's workshop for Mombasa. That sounds so exotic. I know that's just around the corner for you, Peter. But if there's any of you are joining us from outside of Africa and you want to learn more about the PuMP training options for your part of the world, just visit pumpblueprint.com and that will tell you what's going on in other parts of planet Earth. So now the choice is yours. Maybe you now feel like PuMP was made for you and your next step is to come and learn it. Or maybe you've decided PuMP is not for you, in which case we're always keen to learn more about why that might be the case. But right now, we're super keen to find out, has this webcast helped you better understand PuMP? So let me launch that. So if it's helped you understand where PuMP came from, please tick that box. You can tick as many of these as apply. Do the 8 steps of PuMP make sense to you now? Are you in one of the roles that PuMP was made for that we mentioned earlier? Do you have a better appreciation for how PuMP gets implemented in organizations? And finally, do you now think and see how PuMP can support other methodologies as well? So please go ahead, choose as many of those as apply, as many of those that this webcast has helped you get a better understanding of. Great, I'm watching there's still a few of you voting, so I'll give you a bit more time. Great, a little bit more time. Oh, watching the results form here, I've got a question for all of you once I share the results with you. Okay, I'll close the poll now and show you all these results. There we go. a last minute vote came in, Pete, and changed the thing that I was concerned about and was going to ask.
Okay.
Um, but it seemed like only one person felt they were in a role that PuMP was meant to help, but that result's changed now.
Sure.
Um, Pete, I'm glad to see that the 8 steps of PuMP are making sense to everybody. That's really good.
Yeah.
Is there any result there that sort of intrigues you?
Well, what I'm happy about is that many people do understand where PuMP comes from, and that's a good beginning. And yeah, I think, and that they understand the 8 steps. That's very good. I believe, yeah, people need time to digest all this and perhaps read more about PuMP.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably, the lower results on those last 3 probably means that, like you say, not just needing more time to digest, but if there are any other follow-up questions, they can reach out and ask you, Pete, at that email address on the screen there.
Yeah.
So that's PNDAA at b-sea.org. Benjamin says, thanks. Need to leave for another meeting. Warm regards. Lovely, Benjamin. Well, that's pretty much the bulk of the content. We are ready to, before we wrap up, to spend a bit of time to answer any questions you still have about PuMP. So we do have a few questions, Pete, that people submitted when they registered. So we'll start by going through some of those. But for everyone who's here live, if you do have a new question you want to ask, please just use the questions box and type that in. Stay with us as we explore these questions together, or if you have to rush off like Benjamin to another meeting, then just type your question in and we'll be sure to answer it. And you'll hear it in the replay. Actually, Peter, Roland's got a question straight away, so let's go to Roland's question. He says, thank you, Stacey and Peter, for rescheduling and for your explanations. Please, can you give some ideas about initial proofing and getting the first people on board? Pete, I think probably I'll hand over to you, but I think the first thing I'd say for Roland is look for volunteers. Who are the people that are most feeling the pain about their current approach to measurement and are most interested in trying to improve their approach and sound, just seem like they're ready to try something new like PuMP. So I think the volunteer approach is the best way to get started. Do you want to add anything to that, Pete?
Yes, I do agree with you. Just to reemphasize that the need to identify a really problem in the organization that need to be solved, and in addition to the volunteers, I think once people see how PuMP can solve real problems, then you get a higher buy-in. So yeah, volunteers and looking for real problems that are affecting the whole organization or most parts of the organization. It would help a lot.
Yeah, I like that. So Roland, start with volunteers, but have those volunteers focus on something that's really quite important and meaningful to the organization. Lovely. Catherine asks, how do I know I have the right KPIs? That's a very broad question, Pete. Do you want to have a go at responding first?
Yes, it is. I normally have 3 stages in PuMP that I use to check whether I got a real good measures or not,
Yeah.
And the first is during the measure design, using the measure design technique, finding the evidence of the measure and quantifying. That's the very first step of knowing whether you got the right measure or not. And the second stage is when you're defining the measures and you are describing or defining the rationale of using the measure. What question does the measure answer? What decision does it inform? That's also another very good stage to check whether you got the right measure. And if it's not the right measure, it will come out somehow. But above all, when using the measure to report, reporting the measure, if you have the right measure, then the feedback you get from the measure will be consistent with other performance information, because a measure does not work in isolation. It works with other information in the organization. So you find consistency with that. So if performance is improving, the measure, or if the measure is improving, the performance will actually also be improving, etc.
I can't add to that. I think that's the perfect answer to Gavin's question. Excellent. Angie asks, how many are enough? I mean, Pete, you already know that I give this guideline that any team should really only be focused on improving maybe 3 performance measures at a time, even though they might have more KPIs or measures than 3. To focus on more than 3 is too overwhelming, and we can't do an excellent job at improving more than 3 things. So that's kind of my generic approach. But from your experience, Pete, what have you learned?
Yeah, yes, there is always this push to measure everything in organization, and so I have seen a lot of organizations prioritizing, doing we call it a milestone map over the strategic planning period, and they prioritize, and each year they focus maybe on 3 goals, and those 3 goals each might have 1 measure, perhaps one might have 3 measures, or 2 measures. But we try as much as possible to encourage the organization not to have more than 3 measures per goal, because if you have 3 goals that you have prioritized over a year, and each has 3 measures, those are 6 measures, it's a lot of work. But if each has 1 good measure or 2, it's more practical that way, and you're able to improve those 3 areas better than if you focus on perhaps the 6 or 8 goals you have on your strategy at one time.
Absolutely. That's actually a better answer than mine was. I like it. We're getting close to the end of time now, so I'm just going to pick out one more question to answer, Pete. I'm going to just thinking of the one that relates more to the types of comments that have come through today. Priska asks, how do you ensure the alignment of measures at all levels? Now, I'm going to give a 3-word answer to Priska's question and say that it's the results map in PuMP in step 2. The results map helps us get that alignment. Pete, do you want to elaborate or add to that?
I can't add to that, because I think the results map is the most effective tool I've ever come across that helps align all levels, right from team to mission and vision.
It's simple. It shows everything in one place, and it's often the tool when people come to learn PuMP that they get the most excited about and want to start using. Now, we haven't shown you a results map, and we haven't really talked about it at all in this webcast, but you can learn more about it very quickly if you want to. If you go to my blog, which is measureupblog.com, and in the search box, if you type results map, there will be a few articles that come up about it. There'll be one that I wrote about the anatomy of it. There'll be one I wrote about it being a very powerful plan on a page. And there'll be one that Peter wrote about comparing the results map to the balanced scorecard strategy map. So look for those articles, and you can certainly understand a little bit more about why Pete and I recommend that as a great way to get alignment at all levels. Well, they're great questions, everybody. Thank you, but I think it's time to wrap up. So Pete and I really hope that you end up deciding to join our PuMP community by coming to Pete's workshop in Mombasa in November, or if you're not going to be anywhere near Africa in November, then go to pumpblueprint.com and you'll certainly find more options for learning PuMP there. Pete, thanks so much for your insights today, as always.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And PuMP is more than a KPI program. Just want to remind you, from my experience, it's the most effective framework for strategy execution and for improving organizational performance. So Thank you, and see you at our next PuMP workshop.
For now, though, everyone, thanks again for joining us today. It's been great. If you do have further questions, you can email me at info@stacybarr.com, or you can email Pete with the email there on the screen for you. But until next time, bye, everybody.